It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? This question introduced the evening news when I was a child. Whatever news followed, this infamous question was often dire. Someone murdered, someone mugged, someone raped. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? In third grade, when I realized that the world was not perfect, that ominous question served as a reminder of how dangerous my world was. And for a period of several months, the trauma of living in an unsafe place made me so anxious that I vomited every night before bedtime. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? The reminder that my world did not offer me security was a recurring upset. I was hyper-aware that my mother, my two sisters, or I could be the next victim of a violent crime. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? The violence of the streets was not the only crime, however. The violence of poverty disempowered my family, limited our options, kept us invisible, and forced my mother to spend more time working and less time living. I grew up on 183rd and Creston Avenue in the Bronx, New York, not because my mother wanted us to live there, but because that was where she could afford. Watching my mother struggle to earn enough money to send my two sisters and me to the neighborhood parochial school instilled in us the importance of education. My mother inspired me to provide others with what she provided us, a better life through education. However, I had to leave the Bronx in order to pursue quality education. I went to boarding school in Connecticut and college in Vermont on full scholarships. After college, I returned to the Bronx as a middle school teacher because I always wanted to return to the community that motivated me to be who I am today. I wanted to provide my students with quality education that gave them access to a better life. I wanted to be a role model to other children like me. In fact, my Bronx upbringing served as an advantage in winning the trust of my students, their parents, and community members. It gave me street cred. Despite leaving the Bronx to pursue my schooling, I still had my Bronx swag. Or so I thought, until I received this text message from one of my students. "Yo, Miss Simmons, what's the homework?" I read those words off of my phone. I could have stopped there and pat myself on the back for prompting such diligence in my students, but something didn't add up. John signed off of his text message from Ramon's phone. Ramon, another one of my students, and John were amicable, but they weren't cool like that. Upon investigation, I learned that John had borrowed Ramon's phone for a quick call a couple of weeks prior and never returned it. After several inquiries from Ramon, John finally explained that a couple of boys had stolen the phone from him on his way home. Ramon decided that it was his fault for lending out the phone in the first place and accepted its destiny. But I knew that John still had Ramon's phone because he texted me from it. I decided to wait until the next day to approach John. I wanted to give him the opportunity to tell me the truth. However, once approached, John stuck to his story. Why would John risk so much for a phone anyway? I realized that the phone represented freedom, fitting in, being accepted. John often did not have what his peers had. In middle school, when so much importance is attached to material possessions, John often felt left out of the social scene. His lack of material and financial resources made him visibly different. Even though I could understand John's motivation for taking the phone, Ramon's mother was upset and wanted to get the police involved. I did not want John to enter nor become lost in the juvenile justice system, so I decided to call John's mother to resolve the situation. She and I had a friendly relationship of 3 years. She knew that I wanted the best for her son. While on the phone, she questioned John. His story remained consistent. I had proof, I assure them, in the form of a text message, and offered 2 suggestions that did not involve the police. Either John returns the phone or she buys Ramon a new phone. Suddenly, John's mother's tone becomes enraged. How dare you suggest that? I was dumbfounded. What was wrong with my suggestion? Well, that's easy for you to say, Miss Simmons. I don't have $300 to replace a phone like that. You probably do, but not me. For the next 5 minutes, I listened as she berated me. I listened as she told me about her life, about the things she cannot do because she does not have the money to do them. I felt her anger at the injustices she faced. Anger she directed entirely toward me. I was speechless. This was a student I had taught for 3 years. This was a parent I had known for 3 years. And still, at that moment, I divided us. I realized that even though I looked like my students, even though I too hailed from the Bronx, I was different now. While I still lived in the Bronx, for me it was a choice. I had mobility. Over the years, I have acquired privilege and social capital through my schooling. I have grown further from the anxiety-ridden child I once was. What does it mean to return to our community and realize that we no longer fit in because of educational advancement? You see, that phone call to John's mother forced me to realize my new reality. I was a Bronx native and a Bronx educator who had the good fortune of attending boarding school and college in New England. That phone call to John's mother taught me the importance of being mindful of how my behavior, evolving identity, and lived experiences impacted interactions with my students, their families, and community members. It reminded me to check myself. I offended John's mother because I stopped checking myself. I got cocky because I knew I had street cred. Suggestion that John's mother buy Ramon a new phone was insensitive. I ignored the privilege of my consistent paycheck. As educators, we need to be mindful about what we bring to the classroom, our biases, stereotypes, privilege, pain, and guilt, so that we are not destructive to our students and their families. We must check ourselves over and over again, even those of us who have shared identities and lived experiences with our students. Our words, the work we assign, and our actions can wound or inspire students. That is, a mindful educator does the necessary self-reflection to know where she fits in the world and in the classroom. This reflection assures that our baggage does not get in the way of our teaching. And if and when it does, we practice a kind of continuous self-awareness and mindfulness that allows us to debunk our privileges and histories. By knowing our place in the world, we can more effectively ensure student safety and humanity. We could be more deliberate about celebrating students. I celebrated my students by reading writers whose stories resonated with theirs, by constantly adjusting my teaching to meet the needs of my students, and by empowering my students to take ownership in their learning. Actually, one activity that I did in my classroom was dedicating a day to celebrate each student. My students and I would write warm, fuzzy messages on sticky notes, and then I would collect these sticky notes and give them to that student. My students would keep these messages of love and support on their desk for weeks. As a class, we celebrated each other's assets. In essence, a mindful educator is a culturally responsive educator. She pays precise attention to what students bring to the classroom, to what excites and engages them, to what upsets and offends them, and to what makes them feel important and powerful. Recently, a former student sent me an email which read, "Ms. Simmons, you always made notice of the things that made me who I am." So many people will tell you that you can make it, but oftentimes it's only a kind thought. As such, a mindful educator notices her students. She listens. She sees what she does not see. She is present. She teaches in the now. Sadly, in our current educational climate, we are so invested in the rhetoric of reform, so caught up in the pressures of student achievement. Consequently, we lose the nowness in our pedagogy. We focus on state assessments in April and fair school closures in June. We are encouraged to focus on test scores, which diminishes our work and dehumanizes our students. By standardizing our students, we lose them. We lose ourselves. How are we reforming education if we are moving further away from authentically connecting to ourselves and to our students? When we understand ourselves, we understand and relate to others better. Let's take the time to be mindful about why we teach, who we are, and who our students are. Let's invest less time in reforming education and spend more time in actually developing student-centered pedagogy. By being present, by being here now, we could lead our students to success beyond test scores and foster safe learning communities for all. At the end of the day, let's not ask where our students are at 10 p.m. Let's know where they are academically, socially, emotionally, and physically at all times. Thank you.